focused on a lot of other feelings that somehow become part of our life journey that let us know that something's not right for us. And so we'll start with this second phase of the lecture series. And to begin with, we'll just start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. It is your goodness, Lord, that we seek, especially your spirit of wisdom, to come and lead us in ways of living life in freedom and holiness, and to embrace the Spirit's gifts, especially the ones of peace and joy, and a thankful spirit. And as we come together this evening, we pray your blessing upon us in our need, that you may lead us in ways of goodness of life. May your compassionate care for us, which we know is there, move our spirit to receive it, so we may embrace it through Christ our Lord. Amen. Well, it's a beautiful evening in Spring City, so it's nice to have you here tonight, and I will move this second phase that I had for looking at these movements of feelings that come upon us at times that can be very strong and grab our spirit and then move us to have a sense of awareness that perhaps it's good that we pay attention to them. So we move with that giftedness in the beginning of this idea of looking at feelings as the gift that God gives us to be attentive, We can do that with our body. When our body has pain, it moves us right. So we might be ailing us, or even in our emotions of where things get to, our life is sort of captured by a distortion in some way that takes us away from living life in goodness also. So one of the movements that we would like to do is to embrace these feelings that we experience as a giftedness to help us to be attentive and aware that perhaps something is in need of our response and care for ourselves. So as we pause, we just look at that journey of this continuation of looking at these feelings that we want to move with an attentiveness. Remember, I think the movement of it is that especially feelings like anxiety, depression, tension, all those ones that really grab our attention are important for us to just be aware of. They're calling us to stop and look at what's happening, what's going on in our life. These feelings are inviting us to pay attention to that something may be wrong in our own physical body, own way of our spirit. So tonight we're just going to continue to look at that movement of journey of paying attention to, first of all, embracing these feelings. We also mentioned the fact that if you don't embrace the feeling, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. Looking at this movement of journey of these feelings in some kind of way of trying to repress them or it doesn't work. The feelings will not only come back and haunt us, but they will oftentimes get greater than they were before. It's that movement of that imagery of the tiger. A little tiger comes and you don't like the tiger outside your door, so then it'll go away. But it keeps coming back, and you keep it to get rid of it. And all of a sudden, a while later, the tiger grows up. Sometimes, if it gets so big, it may come and devour us. So we don't want to look at our feelings as that movement of repressing them or not paying attention to them. So that there's a beginning of that movement of embracing what we feel. That's the beginning of a way of healing and helping ourselves to be a better way to live life. The other thing, one of the things, as we go through life, we have a lot of thoughts that come to us that are part of our way of framing things that may not be good for us, may not be good for us. And they call those thoughts distorted thoughts, or thoughts that somehow come upon us that have a negative impact. Somehow will move us to lose a sense of our goodness, Huh? There are many of those ways in which we can start being attentive to some of the more severe ones that come up, like I don't like myself, or I hate this life, or I wish I were dead. Huh? Some people get to that point of view of strong responses to these feelings that just move us in these frameworks of thoughts that come upon us. And one of the things that I would like to invite you to is that a lot of these thoughts that we have are not our own. Huh? They're not our own. We didn't choose them. But they come through a life of experiences. Somehow, during our experiences, they are brought within ourselves, and they keep speaking to us. And they keep speaking to us in a way that somehow feels like I'm talking to myself. Huh? And yet, one of the things I would encourage you to do is to say, if you're thinking something, one of the invitations is that the way I want to think? Is that the way I want to see things? Is that my life? Oftentimes, it isn't so. Huh? In first grade, had this invitation of, I hear a child crying or something here. Huh? Oh, okay. So we have a baby there. Okay, that's what it is. Okay. But even as I was growing up, one of the things that I was in first grade, and the nun of our class just said, "Everybody start singing." As we all started singing, and she went around and says, "You shut up, you shut up, you." He to me says, "You shut up." So that movement of a message that gets put in your head somehow, we might say that that's true, but we don't. At least one of my parts of my own background of being Irish, you can't stop and singing. Off key, they'll still sing. Huh? So there's that movement of journey that, I grew up for a long time. Coming back to me. My uncle said to me, "I want you to sing the preface." I said, "Ooh, sing the preface?" At Mass. But it was really a nerve-wracking thing to do, because in the voice of my head is, you can't sing, so you're just going to embarrass yourself. However, got through that, and as time goes on, I've learned to be able to say that I can sing a bit, and I probably make up for it at this point in time. So every time we have an affair, I'll sing, like my German songs or my Irish songs or whatever that may be. But there is that having these voices come embedded in us because of what they say to us, how they impact us. And sometimes they can become very severe. And that's why even teachers with young children have to be very careful about what they say to the children. Because in some kind of way, the children may pick up some kind of an all-handed comment that was to try and help the child to be better or something, but it becomes pretty bad for an image of them and later on in life. That you're really no good. You're dumb. You can't make this. You won't be able to study this stuff. You won't be able to get to that point of learning anything. So be careful. Be conscious of looking for a simple job in your life, whatever else it might be that comes across. People oftentimes aren't clear about how impactful those ways of voices that become incorporated in us, and that continue to speak to us throughout our life. And one of the movements is, it's really important to have this awareness of these voices and to recognize they're not me. My voices oftentimes are not me. They're just voices out of a conditioned way of framing life and out of the past or looking at things. And some of them I like, like my grandmother. Men don't do any kitchen work. Oh, okay, I'll take that one, but that can get you in trouble later on, at least in our own time at this point in time, So, but those ways of framing it, we can live by that. We can live by that. But it's not our choice to be able to make those decisions. They're kind of passed on to us. So we all have these voices inside of us that keep speaking to us. And so it's good to be able to ask that question. Is that the way I want to see it? Is that the way I think about it? Is that how I would like to be? Because sometimes we just go along with the voices and they capture our spirit and capture the way we frame things when we're with other people and the way we frame things for ourselves. So there's an internal voice that can be very destructive to us and we want to be able to acknowledge that and notice it. So we're going to look at this movement of the fact that a lot of our feelings are connected with our thoughts and our thoughts are connected with our feelings. And even as we look at, I said it the other day, or even if the Archbishop walked in here today and wanted to say a few words, how would you feel about it? Well, everybody may have a very different feeling. They may not like the Archbishop, or what he does. And so they may have a negative feeling about him. Other people would say, I love the Archbishop because he's really a good guy, as they see him. But the feeling is different for each person, not because the Archbishop is here, but because how we see it and how we think about it. So our thinking sets up the way we feel about even the things we do in life. So we're going to look at today one of those things of where in our journey of life there are certain patterns of thinking that can be captured by our awareness that if we can catch these, they'll help us not to fall into the traps of not feeling good, not feeling. So take a look at some of these invitations for us to be conscious of in our journey of how we frame things. Now, one of the things I think is important, it's helpful for me to pay attention to my language. What kind of words am I using? What kind of words am I using? When I'm speaking or when I'm with somebody, what are those words? And can I step back and be observant of them? And be able to catch some of these phrases that we'll look at here tonight and recognize that they may be helpful. First one of them is, you have that sheet here, is this all or nothing thinking. If I catch somebody that comes up, they use the words everybody, nobody, every, all the time, all those all or nothing ways of looking at something, I know there's a distorted sense of seeing something. And if I start using them, I would like to step back and change that. Because we can get caught in that all or nothing thinking that leads us into a way of creating a distortion in what we're trying to live by in the situation that we may be in. So it's not good to have that black and white thinking, either or. The better way of looking at things is both and, both and. If I said the weather outside it's really terrible. It's going to be every time it rains, it just messes my life up. Well, I'm not so sure every time it messes my life up. But if I say that, then I go walk and it's raining out there, and my first reaction is, it's a bad day. Since is that I can begin to maybe check out the rain, It's both and. It may be not good for somebody to go out and play golf or something along those lines. However, it might also be beneficial, for my garden, for the earth I live in. So it's both and. It may not be good for recreation, and it's also good for the earth that we live in, that needs to be refreshed by the water that's provided by the rain. So there's a movement of looking at that. The other pieces I catch is people that use superlatives all the time, and even ourselves. Huh? You're the greatest. This is the most exciting thing I've ever done. Or this is the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. All those extreme frameworks of looking at it with this sense of using the superlative can get us and can also distort the way we see life, even the way we might see ourselves. Huh? So there's a goodness of trying to capture changing these words out of it's like if I take a test, if I don't get 100, then I'm a failure. Huh? If I don't get 100, I'm a failure. And perhaps the better way of looking at it is use the comparative. Huh? I did better on this test than I did the other time. So, and even though I got a good mark, rather than I'm the best, I got it all done, I got it all completed in some way of being set up with this all or nothing framework of looking at it. So I would just invite you to be attentive to the words you use. If the words are coming out, everybody, nobody, everything, nothing, all the time, all those kind of words set up a distortion, huh? Because life isn't lived in those extremes, huh? It's lived in the gray area, the middle, where it's both and. So, an attentiveness to that movement of journey. That's one of the so-called patterns of thinking that really can create distortions for us. Another one is overgeneralization. We can overgeneralize something and get ourselves in trouble with that too. I can go on a diet and say, okay, and I wind up eating a cookie. And then I say, I eat a cookie. Well, I broke my diet. It's all over now, so I'll eat the rest of the bag of cookies. So there's a movement of an excuse there, but I overgeneralize just because I had that one cookie that my diet's shot. It's not really shot. It's just that it has a movement of saying, can I have a awareness that it's still there, and even in that light of perhaps I'm calling up when you're young in high school. I just still remember that too. Calling up for a date, huh? And you call up for a date, and all of a sudden, no, I don't want to go out with you. Well, you say, oh God, I overgeneralize because of that one fit. Because I guess it's overgeneralizing that one event will tell me that all the rest are going to be the same, and so why try, huh? And the other thing is, like with mistakes, huh? Sometimes we make a mistake. We just give up, we stop. Having this framework of even changing the way we even look at mistakes. And mistakes are gifts, huh? I like Edison's movement where he was talking, he was trying to create the light bulb, and he called his buddy in because he made it, and he came in, he says, look at this, I got the light bulb. He said, well, how'd you do that, Edison? He says, here's how. He showed him his book. There was 130 experiments in it. And he's paging through, and he says, hey, Edison, these are all. So if we have that movement of an attentiveness that we can learn from our mistakes, that doesn't get us into this overgeneralization that stops us from being determined to get something done, when one event may stop us from doing so. Another movement is a mental filter. And this sometimes we can capture this. Huh? For people who are really feeling down, huh? And if they look at life, everything's gloomy, everything's dark, everything gets colored with these binoculars, these glasses that people put on, that life is so heavy. And there's this filter that comes through that everything that I see is going to come out negative. And I have this way of seeing things out of this disposition that I find myself in, That's not true to begin with. Huh? Not everything's great. Not everything's black and overwhelmingly bad or not good for us. Huh? There's a sense that to change our outlook would be helpful, huh? But it's sometimes very difficult to do. But it's just that that's a bad day. I ain't gonna do anything today. It's the whole day's ruined. I don't want to go see anybody. It's too much trouble. I mean, all that stuff that looking at what's going on, fill the room that I've got myself caught in. And so it's good to step back and just ask that question. Is this the way I want to be? Is this the way I want to go today? What's my value for this day about seeking something? I'd like to find something that's good that I'd like to go out and do. However, sometimes if it becomes overwhelming, it gets us in some pretty deep troubles. There's some times where people get depressed and they don't want to see anything. You pull down all the shades, crawl in bed, stay there, and just spend the whole day there in darkness because it fits the mood that they are in. It doesn't help them in that light of doing so. It just compounds the problem. See things in such a dire strait that we don't have any way to enjoy the things that are really there. So the mental filter can kind of blind us. There's also another one is disqualifying the positive. Huh? Sometimes we do something that's good, and sometimes there are many people, I catch them, that you go to compliment them and they say, oh, no, that's nothing. Anybody could do that. Or people get caught up in a sense of looking at a promotion. Huh? They come in or looking at a job review and they say, well, you got all these things that you did well. That's really good. Yet this you were a little late here a couple of times. So everything gets caught on a little late here a couple of times and I say, I must be a bad worker. It overgeneralizes it. And it also just starts to disqualify the good things that a person has done. Good things that a person has done. I always find that one of those movements of capturing this, and this is one that you can just take yourself a look. What happens when somebody compliments you? What happens when somebody compliments you? You really did a good job. Thank you for being attentive and helping me. And somebody gives that compliment. And what's our response sometimes? Well, it's nothing. Anybody could do that. Rather than being able to have this freedom to accept the gift of a compliment and say thank you. Anytime when somebody gives us a compliment and somehow we start to talk about it, rather than saying thank you, we're going to disqualify it. We're going to find some kind of way to not embrace it. So that there's a movement of a danger in that light of it, that we somehow miss out on this reality that, it was a good thing to be done. And it's good to have a grateful spirit that somehow we just say thank you. So if you say anything other than thank you when somebody gives you a compliment, I would sense that something's going on here. That somehow we don't feel good enough to be able to receive things from people, whatever that might be. Or somehow we don't feel like we're worthy to have a sense of a compliment being given to us. So sometimes we'll again, in that movement, kind of disqualify it by what we say afterwards. Or even to take a look at a job that we did. Huh? Perfectionists got to be really careful. I mean, in this, and I've seen some really great work done. Somebody thought, "Oh, look, you didn't see this over here," and it almost disqualified. I got to rip this whole thing out and start over again. No, it's probably acceptable for 99% of the people, except the person who sees the flaw. And I remember that too. I went out and cleaned the garage. Huh? I said, I did a good job cleaning up the garage. And I think my father walked in and he says, what's this doing here? What's this trash bag doing here? So everything, even though the whole thing was a good thing to be done and I did a great job, that took it away from me. And so I found out in some kind of way I couldn't enjoy, or I wasn't able to celebrate all what I had worked on and did. So it can be disqualified. Jumping to conclusions. I find this one, we have a tendency to start, first of all, mind reading. We start to think we know what people are thinking. And so we just go on that assumption that what I think is happening with them might be the right thing. It might be the way they are. And so I might interpret it out of my own sense of vision, and it may be not an accurate kind of framework to begin with. Sometimes I catch that, I'll get distracted, and so somebody will say, "Oh, are you sick?" I'm not sick, I'm just distracted. But somebody start making me sick, and then I'll start thinking that somehow I got to do all kinds of other things to take care of my sickness that I don't have. That somebody read into it that that's the way it is, and so we have to be careful about thinking for people. And even I get to that point where we can have this movement where it gets more serious. Like, people don't like me. People don't like me. I don't know. People don't like me. I can think they don't like me, but my sense is it would be helpful. Now, the response to this is check it out. Ask the question. Ask the question. And people are not allowed to not like you anyway, but they can be upset with what we're doing, and somehow it's good for us to check it out. We can walk by somebody and it's in the morning, somebody says, and we just consciously not present, walk by and don't say good morning to them. And I say, oh, that person's mad at me. And the person who didn't say it, like I might do that, is that my mind's someplace else. I didn't even see it pass me by, but yet because I didn't say good morning, there's this sense of, oh, he must be angry at me for something like that. There's something must be upsetting him with it. I wonder what I did that really upset it. And it could be nothing except the fact that I was unconscious, walking by somebody, or somebody does that to me. So it's a really important facet is to check things out and not go on the assumption of a conversation and check those pieces out. Otherwise, we're going to live in a world that's not real for us, not real for us, not real for them. And somehow our response is probably going to be negative towards them because we somehow are upset that they were upset with us or whatever it might be, which really wasn't true to begin with. So there's this movement of mind reading that gets caught in that movement too, and of our way of sometimes the voices keep coming back at us and saying these things that throw us off. And I used to have that mind reading thing. I had a good friend of mine, Barney Wagner. He always thought he knew what I wanted, and so he, without even asking, he'd do things. So I know you wanted to have this here, Like he brought over a big milk can one time, put it on the porch, and put Notre Dame on it, put my football number on it, and says, "Wow." Now it would have been nice, and I could thank him for his effort to try and do something nice, because I know you always wanted this. I didn't want it, but it was there, and it sat there a long time, only because I said, "Barney, thank you for the gift, and at least I'll embrace it." But there is that sense of sometimes we'll try to do things for people, and may not be something that they want us to do, what you want them to do for you. So it's good to check it out. Would you like if, or how would you do that? If I did this for you, is that good? Would be helpful? Would that be helpful? So this mind reading, I find it, how would I say? When I do it, I don't like to do it. And when people do it to me, it's uncomfortable. When they think they know it. They know me, know what I'm doing, what it's all about, what's happening. And out of my graciousness at times, I don't confront it as such, although I dismiss it insofar as as that being true. But yeah, and maybe I'll bring it up if it becomes too irritating. But it happens a lot. People do a lot of mind reading for people, especially about their health and things along those lines. And it's always good to check it out from the person. Rig you up and, yeah. So, and other people part of that. So jumping to conclusions. Fortune telling. We can somehow get caught up in the future trying to predict things that are going to happen that might not happen, and we live by them. Huh? Jonestown, think about Jonestown, huh? All the people that went to Jonestown. Following a leader and said the world's going to end in 2 months, and so let us all gather here. Let us get prepared for the end time coming. This is that sense of fortune telling, huh? That happens a lot within the Christian community. About this is the time, this is the end of the world coming, and they'll use prophetic kinds of imagery to say this is it. This is the time when God's going to end the world. And that's been said over and over and over for years and years and years, millennia. So, and if people believe in that, then it changes the whole kind of framework of life. And like I say, there's that whole crew committed suicide, huh? And everybody just because of that belief that was a future telling of, well, we'll go to heaven if we do this, and we won't have to deal with the destructiveness of the end of the time. So, yeah, fortune telling can get in the way of leading us into a place where we try to live in the future rather than in the present. Huh? And we can get ourselves fortune telling in the sense of, oh, there's a test coming up. Huh? I'm not going to pass it, so I'm not going to study for it. And there's negative kind of ways. Magnification and minimization. We can magnify our mistakes and things along those lines, and that can get out of hand too, huh? A simple thing can get magnified. Huh? I didn't have the opportunity to make a phone call to somebody, and will magnify that kind of a sense of that's bad of me. Huh? And I'll magnify that mistake into a bad me issue, or and that person's really going to be angry at me because I didn't call, or whatever else it might lead to. Huh? And there's an attentiveness to be, I guess, responsible. That's always a good thing to do. But sometimes when we magnify even our mistakes, or sometimes we even magnify our power sometimes. So we have for instance, it's good for us to have this sense of not giving people power and not taking power over people. In the light of, I'm responsible for somebody and how they feel. I can get caught up in that magnification of the fact that I take on this responsibility of control for the other person, and I magnify my relationship with them as a way that I've got to take care of them. Now there's I grew up that way, so I know that there's a reason for that. My mother, when she was raising me, would come in and say, "Boy, you made me angry." And I said, "Ooh, I got a lot of power and control here. I can make my mother angry." But she says, "You made me happy." I said, "Ooh, I can make her happy." So I've got this power of control over somebody, and then I can magnify the fact that somehow that I'm responsible for her. She's not feeling right, it's my fault. If she's feeling good, maybe I did something right. But it all comes back to me to make sure that that's okay. And sometimes we can live our life with people in that light of thinking that we can make them feel good or feel bad. one of the movements here is that I don't want to do that. I don't want to have control to make people feel good or make people feel bad. I would like to celebrate them with them. I'd like to offer them an opportunity to join in a good time or whatever else that might be. But if I start taking responsibility for how somebody feels, then I may be in some pretty strong difficulty. Because I think and the issue behind that is I magnify my importance by the fact that I have such power. And we can recognize when sometimes even our thinking gets out of that hand, it gets magnified. Like I can have many people would say, why don't you fly in an airplane? Oh, an airplane is going to crash. Huh? If I go in that plane, it's going to crash. And then what am I going to do? I don't want to crash in an airplane. Well, I can magnify the fear out of that to the point where I won't fly. Because somehow it's not realistic. Huh? Flying is, riding in a car is much more dangerous than flying, according to statistics. But we can magnify a fear, and all of a sudden it'll take over on us, and we get stymied in what we wind up doing. And then the events have this movement to move our own spirit into a fearfulness. And we won't attempt to do that. So just be conscious of minimization too. Sometimes we can minimize things, and we wind up getting in trouble. Huh? That cheesecake's been in there 4 weeks. Now I can eat that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'll just eat that. The next thing you know, bad news. We can minimize the fact that there's any danger there, and not be careful of that too. Or even in what we do. Sometimes we gotta be careful of what we do. I used to get in a lot of trouble. Thank God my body was supple enough. I go skiing. I can go down that hill. I ski down it. It's a 4 diamond. That's okay. I can take care of that. And I wind up in the trees somewhere or something like that. But not a very good thing to do. That was trying to minimize the fact that somehow nothing bad would happen. We go to emotional reasoning. It is as if I feel it, it must be so. If I feel it, it must be so. If I even have this sense of facts don't back up sometimes how I feel. But the feeling can distort the facts. And sometimes, again, I would say that I know things are okay to do, but my emotional reasoning would get in the way. My emotions. We talked about that before. That somehow, when the feelings is strong enough, it's just that I don't have feelings. I become the feeling. Like I don't have just fear. I become fearful. I don't have this sense of feeling anxious. I become anxious. There's a movement of life that regresses us back to a child, because child is its feelings, and we have them as adults. And so, like I just walk out on a lanai and look over the side, and I will get extremely anxious to the point where I become anxious. I'm conscious of that there's a fearfulness there about heights, and I don't like standing out. Is it safe? Is it going to fall? Whatever all those things are. Even though people have been dancing out there and doing all kinds of good things and being able to do okay, but my unreasonableness takes me away, even from being able to participate with other people in that place. I talked about the needle out there, like going up and having lunch in this top of this floor, way up in the air in this little structure. It looked like it would be blown over. And hard to get myself convinced that it's okay to go up there, which it was. It was safe. It was safe. But my fearfulness would have kept me away from it, which is unreasonable. And so it's be careful that sometimes our feelings don't run our life. We recognize that those emotions that we have some thoughts behind it. It's the thoughts that are important to take care of with regards to it. So, yeah, sometimes it's hard to overcome some of those thoughts. I had a sense of, yeah, like heights. One of the ways I thought I'd challenge my fear of heights is to go parachuting. And so I did that. And I said, ooh, was it safe? Well, to a point it was safe. Yeah, it was safe. The chute opened and I was happy. And that happens for 99% of the people, a high percentage anyway, so that part's okay. But it was surely a harrowing experience. I got so anxious that I began to disassociate, which is a part of an overemphasis of fear. Where I was in the back seat of this airplane, and he says, okay, go up, you're going to jump. I started moving, and I'm talking to myself. My thought, my spirit was in the back seat, and my body's moving ahead. I got disconnected from my body, and I said, "Whew!" It was an interesting experience because when people start talking about disassociation, it is. I've experienced that, and then I got out on that plane. I looked down. I said, "Whoo!" It was like these little houses down there and all this space, and it says, "Okay, well, go ahead." So I did. And I jumped. You got in the right flight air position, you know, and you're supposed to count to 1,001. You get to 1,010 and your chute hasn't opened. You got an auxiliary chute if you have to make use of it. I didn't say anything. I said, "Come on, chute open. Come on, chute open." and the chute opened. That was the good part. So it was safe to fly down there. The unsafe part was my landing place was not on the airport. It was in the middle of the housing project. So that wasn't that whole part of the experience. So anyway, our emotions can affect what we do, and we'd rather be able to choose what we do rather than have our emotions tell us what to do. That's because that's the kid inside me running my life. Huh? My kid is my emotions. My reasonableness is my adult part of me. And I'd like to move with my adult reasonable sense of life to be lived rather than the kid taking over. But it can take over very oftentimes. It's important to be careful about that. It'll stop us from doing things because the feeling can be so strong. Again, my favorite one is the shoulds, ought to, must, needs, and have tos. Huh? I find that it's interesting if you just, again, language. Language is really important. Just the way people frame things. Huh? And like tomorrow, I have to get up tomorrow to say Mass. Well, I have to puts an obligation on it. And in that light of it, it begins to have this sense of I got to be responsible to something else that tells me I got to be there, rather than my own responsibility saying it would be good for me to get up and be at Mass. That would be my response, rather than I have to, should, must, ought, need to. There's a calmer sense of it. A person who has a lot of shoulds, and if you listen to their language, there's going to be a lot of tension in their life. A lot of tension in their life. They're trying to do things out of a sense of meeting obligations. And usually a side part of that is if I don't meet my obligation, or if I don't do that, then I feel guilty, or I feel that someone's angry at me. Somebody's angry because I didn't fulfill the obligation that whoever put it together for me has structured it. So there's that challenge of looking at the should statements. Huh? Not that and it is the fact that it'd be good for us to be responsible. Huh? Not that we shouldn't use shoulds. Huh? It would be helpful not to use them. I say, I offer you that opportunity to check out if you can use other words, like it would be better if, it would be helpful if, it would be nice if, it would be good if. If you're having tension in your life, I would check and see how many shoulds you have in your life, and I would replace it by that kind of language, so that somehow that there's not this movement of obligation that I got to get it done. I have to get it done. It might be good for me to do it, and that's a good thing for me to do, and I'll choose to do that. The other thing about this should stuff is that if you're using shoulds on people, you're angry at them. Now, the reason why is because they're not meeting your expectation. You shouldn't do it that way. Huh? Do it my way. Huh? You should finish your meal because I say so. Huh? And that movement comes that somehow, if you don't do what I say you should do, or ought to do, or have to do, must do, there's a anger of anger that comes out of that towards the person that's not doing what I think they should do. So it's an unconscious framework, but it's a framework that gets put in there unconsciously. We don't do it purposely. And yet, it would be good to check that out for yourselves as you go through your relationship with people and your language with people. When does it come up? When does it should and have to and ought to come up? And how do you read it? And the other thing is, if we put it on ourselves, I should have done that. I'm angry at myself. And one of the things I'll say in life is we're not allowed to be angry at anybody. To me, that's a no-no. It's helpful to make this distinction that they can be angry at what people do, but not who they are. So if I even talked to in pre-Cana, just with couples coming in, you just can't point the finger at somebody and saying you should do this, or you should have done this, or you should have known better. Now, if you do that, you're going to war, because the person's going to feel the anger. They're going to come back and say, "What do you mean I should do that?" Well, you should do this too. It gets back and forth in a confrontation. The better way to do that is to take a table and put it out in front of you and say, "What are you upset about?" And they say, up to the behavior and point to the behavior. This behavior this upsets me when you do this. Not you. As soon as it gets pointed onto the you, we get in trouble. And now we're going to have a confrontation in some kind of way. And we are going to have that sense of feeling of anger at somebody because they're not doing it the way we think they are supposed to do that. Now, so this movement of shoulds, ought to, and have, must, if you can be conscious of it, it does set up tensions because it's obligations that need to be, ought to be, should be done. And it's a pressure. It gets to be a pressure. So if you're having a lot of tension in your life, the vocabulary in how you speak to yourself and how you look at issues, especially with regards to the shoulds. The shoulds are, it's a shouldy world we live in. I mean, if you just listen to people, but there's have to, must, ought, and should frameworks, and we've got to watch how that moves. And it doesn't mean we're not to be irresponsible because we don't do what we somehow the framework of should be framed as. I feel much better when I do it because I know it's better for me to do it this way. It's good for me to do it this way. I'm better off if I do it this way. Not that I should do it and have to do it. Yet when we're children, we're born with a lot of shoulds because that's where we are, because we act in a kind of a conditional way. Labeling, another kind of movement of something to be careful about. I always like the Old Testament because God has no labels of identity of name. You weren't allowed to use God's name in the Old Testament because to label God with a name is to take something away from God, because our own naming of God would fall short from who God really is. He's bigger than what we can name him to be. So we use words to identify our sense with God in his presence. But we have to be careful that we don't make it an identifying kind of, a fully identifying movement of who God is, because God's more mystery than it is a problem to be solved by a name. So there's a goodness of us to be conscious of that, and to label somebody is to actually take away their dignity in some way. The only way I would like to label somebody is to tell them that they're a beloved son of God or beloved son of daughter. I would say what God says about them. That's all I come up and say, you are, huh? Well, all those you are stupid, huh? You're really dumb. You're really ignorant. All those kind of you are's really label somebody in a way that's not true. Okay, that's not who they are. Their behavior might be bad, so if we stay on the behavior, we can talk about the behavior maybe that way, but not the person. So it's overstepping a bounds. We have to watch it for ourselves in that way. I can get that idea that, oh, Harry, you're really stupid. And that's true in one way. I do a lot of stupid things. But one of the things is, I do a lot of stupid things, but I'm not stupid. Huh? But that was a stupid thing to do. But as soon as I start identifying my behavior as being stupid with me being stupid, now I'm in trouble. And if I label myself that way, that's an injustice. And so it'd be good to look at the labels that we have about ourselves, that it'd be good to just review and say, are they true? Is that the way I am? Is that the way I see myself? Is that the way God sees me, for one thing? And how does God see me? I'd like to be able to move with that kind of framework rather than a lot of what people say as labels. And boy, but it does get people's attention, huh? If you label them. You idiot. Well, calls me an idiot. Now I gotta prove to you that I'm not an idiot, and I know just to see my own sense of self-respect, or whatever it might be, and I can get in a lot of trouble that way. So be careful even when people put labels. Jesus' movement in life, huh? He was called a lot of things. He was even called the devil. Huh? He was called a betrayer. He was called a blasphemer. But he wasn't any of those things, huh? And he didn't even do them, but that's another thing. But Jesus had that sense of, that's not who I am. I'm not the labels you put upon me. I'm really the son. I am really my Father's son. That's who I am. And I'll stay with that. So whatever you say doesn't count, huh? as far as labels are concerned. You might talk about my behavior, and we can talk about that, but not about who I am. And it's not good for us to say something about who other people are by labeling them. So I would watch out for those you are, I am statements. Huh? You are whatever comes after that, or I am whatever comes after that. They will put us in a bind. And personalization, the 10th one of these, is another one of the frameworks of taking on something that it's not good for us to do. It really is. Personalization really comes when people, again, identify our behavior with who we are. And then that part of it, and sometimes that we take that on for ourselves. Huh? We personalize what people say about who we are, what we do, or who we are. And that's really not a healthy thing to do. Huh? That's not a good thing. It's a distortion. Huh? I have to be conscious of that. Huh? As soon as I personalize something, then I feel bad about what I did. Now I feel bad about me. That's a dangerous thing to get caught up in. Guilt's one of those things we have to be careful of, huh? Because guilt is one of those things that if I'm feeling guilty, I can do that in one wholesome way. I can feel guilty about what I did, but I don't want to feel guilty about me. There's something bad about me. I'm guilty about. I feel that guilt comes on me. Bad you, bad you. If I do some bad behavior, and then the bad behavior gets interpreted to me, bad me. That personalizing what I do with who I am just gets in the way of distorting my sense of who I am, and puts me in a bind of not being able to be free to live life in the goodness of the presence of other people. And then I get always fearful in this personalization. What do they think about me? Well, whatever they think about me somehow can distort even the way I see myself. And so that's this movement of journey. Of these distorted frameworks of thinking. I'll just offer them to you. This has been it comes from a lot of psychic background movements of how to be able to become like basically your own therapist. Huh? That is, if we want to feel better about life, then I'd watch out for these traps. Because these will all lead us into a place of something that's not true to begin with. And if we follow this sense of being something that's not true, we'll get in trouble. We'll get in trouble. We won't feel good about life or ourselves or how we move and be with other people. So there's this danger of looking at these traps that just take us away from. But Jesus would say, huh? Jesus' whole thing is live by the truth. Huh? These are all distorted ways of thinking. These are all just traps that set up distortions for us. And if we live by them, we're going to feel uncomfortable. And so if you're feeling uncomfortable, say, "Oh, that's a good thing." Then I would look for one of these traps that's there. That's a more reasonable way of framing it, without this voice telling me how life is, or how I am, or what I should do, or how I ought to live life, or whatever it is. And yeah, that would be a helpful way of getting free to a better life. So even when we look at anxiety in that movement of journey, I would say anxiety is the great gift, of being attentive. That some of our thinking or anxiety will come out of these frameworks. One of these is taking power over us, and it's creating a tension in our life that makes us anxious about who we are, how life is to be lived, and what life is we can expect out of life. So that invitation is, how do we move with a giftedness of maybe paying attention to these traps that come up. And we do that by the beginning of our own sense of awareness, and our awareness is, how am I feeling? I'm feeling tense. If I'm feeling tense during the day, I'm pretty clear about it. I'd look for the shoulds, or some other kind of, just taking away a vision of life that is not true to begin with, but sets us up into a pattern of thinking that disrupts our spirit, which is a good thing to do. And God says that's how God speaks to us, to be attentive. And maybe the invitation is, where is this problem that I'm experiencing because I'm not free to live life well? Where is it coming from? And then I would look at one of these so-called traps that are there. And so what happens is that if I can look at it and capture some of this, I can change the way I think. I can change the way I think. If I change the way I think, I'll change the way I feel. So there's a movement of that happening. I can walk down here on a Sunday morning and say, "Oh God, now I got to say Mass. I got to go in there, set up for everything." If I have all this I got to, have to, shoulds, or whatever it is, then it's going to set up a tension. It's going to, and I probably don't want to even be there. So that doesn't start off a good way to celebrate liturgy, not wanting to be there. So I can change the way I look at it as I'm walking down. I say, well, this is an opportunity to do something for the parish and the people who come here. Let me set this up so the Mass can be said in a way that it'll flow okay, because we have everything ready and we're ready to go. And so I look at it as an opportunity rather than as a drudgery of coming down here to do something. But if I change the way I look at it and see it, I'll change the way I feel. I'll just say thank you for your patience. It's interesting about, I'm probably not so good with this idea of the talks as I got to do one-on-one with people in this conversation with people. I'm noticing that. I used to give a lot of lectures, but I think my mind's not as quick as it used to be. So I thank you for coming and listening and putting up with my droning voice. It may have a tendency to put you to sleep at times, but
don't have a negative attitude about that.
I know. That's true. I would say, yeah, and I hope that there was something that was worthwhile you got out of this. And so, thank you for being here. Okay.